She only meant to clear her head. She did not expect to find a scorched dog collar buried in the ash, or the ghost of a love that refused to die. Brenda Holloway had not cried in 3 years. Not during the divorce. Not even at the funeral, when they folded the flag and handed it to her with quiet eyes and scripted sympathy. But something about the collar, the way it crunched faintly in her gloved hand, half welded to the roots of a singed oak, loosened something inside her she had not realized was still clenched. It was January 2023, and the air still smelled of loss. 2 years had passed since the Larkspur fire turned the California hills into an endless grave of soot and silence. Brenda had fought it. Helmet soaked, boots melting at the soles, carrying evacuees and cats and charred hopes on her back. Now she walked the burned scar trails near Paradise Ridge, no longer on duty but still restless, as if the land itself whispered things it was not ready to forget. She found the collar buried beneath the ruin of a collapsed fence. Blackened leather, bent brass buckle, the queer tag barely hanging on. She crouched and turned the metal square over with a thumb. Faded words beneath the grime. Scan me if found. Tuck. Tuck. A name that lodged itself instantly in her chest like a half-buried nail. Not just a name, a story. A life. Back at her truck, parked crooked by the trailhead, Brenda wiped the tag clean with a baby wipe from her glove box. It was a habit now, clean hands, even off duty. She angled her phone over the code. The screen flickered, then loaded. A memorial page, dated August 27th, 2021. In loving memory of Tuck. He was more than a dog. He was my shadow. My last heartbeat after the fire took everything else. Lost during the evacuation. Never found. If you are seeing this, thank you for remembering him. Ruth Ellen Mosley. Ridgeview, California. Brenda stared at the screen. Ruth Ellen Mosley. The name tugged at her memory. An evacuee. Maybe. She would pull dozens from that fire, but few names stuck. Still, the face behind the tribute photo of Tuck, an elderly woman with white braids and a wide straw hat, felt familiar in a way that made her chest ache. The dog in the picture had a patchy white coat, one brown ear, and eyes so soulful they seemed painted on. She sat still for a long time. Engine off. Silence hanging. And that night, at 2:12 a.m., something scratched at her front door. Brenda lived alone on the edge of Oroville, in a one-story cinder block house that still bore the same sand-colored paint from the 60s. Her porch light had died earlier in the week. The neighborhood was too old for trick-or-treaters and too far from town for late-night visitors. But the scratching was real, soft, hesitant, alive. She opened the door in her flannel pajamas, baseball bat in one hand, and stared. There, under the porch light's ghost glow, stood a dog. White fur, grimed with ash and pine tar, one ear cocked, the other drooping. He was thin, ribs mapping out his story, and his eyes God. His eyes looked straight through her like he knew her name before she said it. Around his neck, a half-burnt collar, the kuroteg dangling like a memory. Tuck. She whispered. The dog did not move. Didn't he flinch? But his tail thudded gently once against the porch step. She did not sleep that night. Brenda sat on the kitchen floor, a wool blanket draped over Tuck like a child's coat. He trembled and twitched in sleep, soft whimpers echoing down the linoleum. She offered water, broth, an old fleece towel that still smelled of her late Labrador, Bear. But she did not cry. Instead, she watched the rise and fall of Tuck's sides, counted the scars on his flanks, wondered what he had seen, what he had survived. 2 years alone in a dead forest, 2 years of silence, smoke, and ghosts. By dawn, the decision was made. She pulled out her laptop and searched for Ruth Ellen Mosley. Not Facebook. Ruth had the sort of name that suggested yellowing directories and paper mail. But Brenda found a property listing sold 122 Hayward Hollow Erd, Ridgeview, and then a utility permit filed 6 months ago for a trailer hookup just outside Chico. And then a phone number, faint in the header of an old GoFundMe campaign. Help Ruth rebuild after the fire. She called. No answer. She texted. Waited. Outside, Tuck lay curled in the patch of sun on her porch, paws tucked beneath his chest like prayer hands. At 8:47, her phone finally buzzed. This is Ruth. Who is this? Brenda's fingers hovered, then typed, I found something that belongs to you, or maybe someone. His name is Tuck. The dots blinked, paused, then, that is not funny. Brenda swallowed. I am not joking. I scanned the collar. He came to my door last night. He is alive. Scarred, thin, but alive. This time, the response took longer. Several minutes. Then, can you send a photo? Brenda turned, stepped outside. Tuck lifted his head, blinked at her. No fear in him, just an eerie stillness, like someone who had watched 1,000 sunrises alone. She snapped a photo, sent it. The reply came faster this time. Hold. Where are you? Part 2. The dog who remembered the way back. Brenda Holloway did not know what to expect when she pulled into the gravel lot behind the faded mobile home. Tuck stood in the truck bed, silent, eyes scanning the scrubby trees as if they might vanish if he blinked. She had not created him. She could not. Something about that felt wrong. After surviving whatever hell he had for 2 long years, he deserved the dignity of open air. The trailer's skirting was half gutted, revealing a web of old plumbing and rusted cans. Wind chimes made from spoons clinked on the porch. A plastic chair had collapsed into itself, and a potted aloe plant sat cracked and dry in the corner. But the door opened before Brenda could knock. Are you her? The voice was gravel wrapped in molasses. Ruth Ellen Mosley stood barefoot in the threshold. Grey hair frizzed around her temples. She wore a dress the color of wet clay, and her eyes mud-brown, sharp, settled on Brenda with a weight that said she did not believe in second chances. I am Brenda, she said quietly. From Oroville. Fire department. Until last year, I brought him. Behind her, the truck creaked. Ruth stepped down one stair, then another, and then Tuck leapt from the truck bed. He did not bark. He did not wag his tail. He just walked forward. Deliberate, like he would map this path in his dreams. Ruth's hands trembled. She pressed them to her mouth. Jesus, Mary, and Her voice cracked. "Tuck, baby." The dog stopped 2 feet away, tilted his head. His ears were lower now, uncertain. Then Ruth sank to her knees on the gravel and whispered, "See, Mia. Sugar." That was all it took. Tuck surged forward, nuzzling into her chest, whining low and broken. Ruth cradled his face in both hands, running her thumbs over the hollows where Fur used to be. "You poor thing. You poor, brave thing." Brenda looked away. It felt like watching a reunion she had no right to witness. Like opening someone else's family Bible and reading the names aloud. Inside the trailer, everything smelled of cedar chips and lemon balm. Ruth poured tea sweet, black, strong enough to cut grief, and sat on a creaky bench beside the space heater. Tuck lay curled at her feet, asleep now, his breath slow and deep. "I thought he was gone," Ruth said, eyes on the wall. 2 years. I never even got to bury him." Brenda nodded. "I saw your memorial, the one tied to the collar." Ruth's laugh was dry. "I made that page so I would stop checking the shelters. Tuck had this thing. He would follow the scent of a deer right into the next county. I kept telling myself he made it out, lived with some rancher, found a new porch." Her voice thinned. "But in my gut, I figured he burned." Brenda stayed quiet. The heater buzzed. "He was my husband's dog," Ruth said softly. "Robert trained him from a pup. Tuck was supposed to be our retirement dog. You know the type. Grew herbs, made cobbler, watched the sunset with a mutt between our chairs." She gave a brittle smile, but the fire did not care about any of that. Brenda knew the truth too well. She remembered the screams through the dispatch radio, the way embers moved like insects in the air, whole hillsides glowing red like open wounds. "I fought that fire," she said. "Your neighborhood went up faster than anything we would ever seen." Ruth nodded. "I tried to get him. I called and called, but the smoke came in so fast. He bolted. He was always skittish about loud sounds, had a bad run-in with a nail gun once. I left the back gate open in case he came back." Her eyes closed. "But I never saw him again. Until today." Brenda shifted, hands folded in her lap. "He came to my house last night. Just showed up, like he had been walking toward me for 2 years. Ruth did not answer. She was stroking Tuck's ear now, slow and reverent. "I do not know why," Brenda said. "Why now? Why me?" "Maybe because you saw the collar," Ruth whispered. "Maybe you were the only one who noticed he mattered." That night, Brenda stayed in a cheap motel off Highway 32. The walls were thin, and the bed sagged in the middle like an old bruise. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan-spinning shadows above her. She thought of Bear, her Labrador, the one who died just before the fire, the one she never got to say goodbye to, either, the one who had worn a red nylon collar with a broken clasp and used to follow her from room to room like a quiet thought. When she closed her eyes, she saw Tuck's face, those eyes like polished river stones. What did he remember? Who had he become, out there all alone? And why did a piece of her wish he had stayed? The next morning, Brenda returned to say goodbye. Ruth greeted her with a flannel over her dress and a brush in one hand. He did not sleep at all. She said, eyes tired but lit, kept pacing, checking every door, like he thought he would lose it all again. Brenda nodded. Give it time. She bent down to stroke Tuck's fur. It was coarse in patches. He licked her wrist. Once. I think he remembers you, Ruth said. Maybe. Brenda stood. Then Ruth reached behind the screen door and held out something wrapped in cloth. I do not have much, she said, but I kept this when I left. Found it in the ruins last year. It was Robert's. She unfolded the cloth. Inside was a brass dog whistle on a leather cord. Tuck never responded to it. She said, but Robert swore it meant something, said one day. Someone would need to remember. Brenda took it, thumbed the cool metal. Thank you, she said, and meant it. Ruth placed a hand on her arm. You brought my dog home, she said. That makes you family now, whether you like it or not. Brenda smiled for the first time in days. But as she turned to leave, Tuck whined softly, a low, pleading sound, and Ruth's face darkened. There is something else, she said, and what she said next made Brenda stop in her tracks. Part 3. The Whistle and the Fireline Memory. There is something else, Ruth said, her voice barely above a whisper. Brenda paused on the porch, one hand still clutching the dog whistle. The winter air shifted. Tuck stood behind Ruth, tail still, ears slightly perked as if he already knew what Ruth was about to say. Ruth lowered herself into the plastic chair beside the doorframe. It groaned under her weight, but she did not seem to notice. Her hands twisted the hem of her flannel, like she was wringing out a memory. He saved someone, she said. Brenda blinked. What? During the fire? Tuck. The day he disappeared. He did not just run. Ruth leaned forward, voice trembling. A neighbor, Walt Laramie, he was in his 90s. Half blind. Still lived alone up the road. After the evacuation, the sheriff's office told me Walt had been found unconscious, dragged out of his house just minutes before it collapsed. Brenda's breath caught. They assumed it was a good Samaritan. But Walt, before he passed, told the paramedic he would seen a white dog with a brown ear, pulling on his pants leg, barking. Then everything went dark. She looked up. They thought he was confused. Brenda sat slowly on the top step. You think it was Tuck? I know it was. Ruth's eyes shimmered. He ran into fire for a stranger, and never found his way home. Tuck laid his head on Ruth's bare foot and closed his eyes. For a long moment, no one said anything. Then Brenda took the whistle from her pocket. The brass was cool against her palm, heavy in a way that had nothing to do with weight. Robert used this on hikes, Ruth murmured. Said it was the only thing that ever made Tuck stop chasing shadows. Brenda brought the whistle to her lips and blew softly. No sound. At least, none she could hear. But Tucker's ears twitched. He lifted his head, stood. Then he walked strode over to Brenda and sat at her feet, looking up, like he was waiting for the next command. That evening, Brenda drove back home with the whistle around her neck. She could not stop replaying Ruth's words. He saved someone. He disappeared. He came back. And now, he was still pacing, still checking doors, still listening for something that was not there. Maybe it was not enough to survive. Maybe Tuck needed to finish something. Brenda pulled off the highway and turned down a familiar gravel road, the one that led to the old Ridgeview burn zone. It had been restricted after the fire, but reopened recently to the public. Most folks avoided it. Too many ghosts. She parked near the ruins of what had once been the Laramie place. Only the brick chimney remained, blackened and freestanding like a monument to something no one wanted to remember. The wind picked up. Tuck jumped from the passenger seat and began walking, slow but steady, toward the tree line. Brenda followed. The light faded fast under the canopy. What had not burned still bore the scars, branches half gone. Bark flayed. And then Tuck stopped. He stood in front of an old clearing, overgrown with charred grass and stubborn weeds. At the center, a blackened fire ring. Broken glass. The rusted frame of a camping chair. Brenda's chest tightened. She would been here. During the fire, it had been a spot for evacuees to rest before transport. She remembered a teenage girl, shoes melted halfway through, screaming for her brother, a man with a bloodied head, sobbing into the fur of a trembling stray. She had not remembered the dog until now. Was it Tuck? He circled the ring once, then twice, then sat down and whined. Brenda crouched beside him. "I think this is where you waited," she whispered. "After you saved that man." Tuck leaned into her, his ribs pressed through her coat. Brenda looked around, saw nothing but trees, ash, and silence. Then she noticed something sticking out beneath a stump. A small metal box. Half buried. She dug it out, hands shaking. Inside, a photograph, burnt at the edges. A young man, arms around Tuck, both grinning. Behind them, a fire truck, engine 7 Ridgeview VF'd. Brenda's heart stopped. She flipped the photo over. "Tuck, you are not just a dog. You are every damn reason I keep going." Caleb. Her breath caught in her throat. Caleb Ramirez, her old rookie, transferred just before the fire, reported missing during the blaze. Presumed dead. But they never found his body. Brenda rose slowly. Was this where Tuck had last seen him? Was this what the dog had been searching for, who he had been waiting for? She stared at the photo, her hands trembling now. Had Caleb been out here, trying to help evacuees? Had he and Tuck gotten separated? Had Tuck survived him? As the sun dipped behind the trees, casting the clearing in a honeyed gloom, Brenda slipped the photo back into the box. She looked down at Tuck. "You have been carrying ghosts," she whispered. "So have..." She knelt and wrapped her arms around him. And this time, she cried. Not for Bear, not for Caleb, not even for herself, but for a dog who never gave up the watch, for a loyalty that did not know how to die. Back at home, Brenda placed the box on her mantel beside a small wooden urn-marked bear. She added the whistle next to it. Then she turned to Tuck. "You are staying?" she said. Tuck wagged his tail. "Just once." then curled up in bare-soled bed like it had always been his. But in the dead of night, Brenda sat upright. She had remembered something from that day, a voice on the radio. Ridgeview 7, man down last seen with a white dog, and then silence. Which meant Caleb's last known location had not been the clearing. It had been deeper in, past the ridge. Brenda reached for the whistle. Tuck was already standing. Part 4. The ridge beyond the fire line. The fog was low over the hills when Brenda parked at the trailhead, just past mile marker 22. January air bit through her jacket, crisp and sharp with pine sap and memory. The old map of the Ridgeview sector flapped in her hand, corners water-stained and soft with time. She would found it last night in her gearbox. Buried beneath a tangle of trauma, she thought, she would stored away, for good. Tuck sat in the truck's passenger seat. Watching her, he had not barked. Not once. But when she opened the door, he leapt down without hesitation, nose lifted toward the tree line like something was calling him. Or maybe calling them both? Brenda checked her radio, still clipped to her belt like habit. Though it had not crackled in over a year. This was it, she murmured to no one in particular, where they lost contact. The final call-out. Man down, accompanied by a white dog. They hiked past scorched ferns and fallen pines. Tuck stayed ahead, never straying more than 20 feet. His movements were precise, purposeful, as if some compass inside him pointed toward the ridge. Brenda followed. Her knees ached with every step, but she did not complain. She could not, because this was not just a dog. This was a witness, a bearer of something sacred, a truth she had not been ready to hear until now. It took an hour to reach the firebreak. Beyond it, the woods thickened bramble and half-dead oaks, knitted into a wall of dark green. Few had come this far since the fire. The trails were not maintained. Trees leaned like tired sentinels. Tuck paused at a clearing edged with jagged stone and old stumps. He turned back toward her, eyes steady. Waiting, Brenda stepped into the clearing. She saw it instantly. Half buried in leaves, a rusted oxygen tank. Nearby, a melted fire helmet, blackened and split. She knelt. Breath tight. There were claw marks on the dirt. Deep gouges. Signs of a struggle. And something else. A dog-tagging military issue. Charred, but legible. Colden. Oppose. This is... Brenda stared. Colden was not Caleb. But she remembered now Colden had been a contractor helping with the Ridgeview evacuations. He would been listed as missing, lost contact near Sector 9. This was not where Caleb fell, but someone else had. She turned slowly. Tuck was sniffing a shallow depression in the ground. It was not a grave, but it could have been a place of shelter, or hiding, or waiting. Did you stay with him? Brenda asked. Tuck looked up, and for the first time, whimpered. Back at the truck, Brenda placed the tag gently in the glove box. Beside the photograph of Caleb, Tuck curled up in the back seat, but his eyes remained open, fixed on the window, as if still watching. They drove in silence until the ridge gave way to the flats. And then Brenda made a turn she had not planned to. The Chico vet center sat quiet under a slate-gray sky. The receptionist looked up as Brenda walked in. Dog at her side. Can I help you? I think I found something that belongs to a family. Brenda said. Someone who went missing during the Ridgeview fire. A contractor named Colden. The woman's expression changed. You are kidding? Brenda held out the tag. I do not know if they ever got closure. Later that day, Ruth called. Brenda. Her voice cracked with static. Are you home? Just got in. Then you might want to step outside. On Brenda's porch stood a man in his late 20s. Tall. Slim. His jacket was dusty. In his hands, he held a bouquet of wild sage and a folded envelope. Sorry, he said. You do not know me. Brenda squinted. My name's Elijah Colden. My uncle. He was out there during the fire. My mom told me you called the center today. I did. He was all I had left after Dad died. Elijah held up the envelope. He used to write me letters. Left them in his kit. I had not opened this one. Not until I heard you found his tag. Brenda stepped back. Do you want to come in? He looked down. Behind him, Tuck emerged from the Yar's shadow, walking slowly toward the man. And stopped. Elijah's mouth fell open. Wait, this is the dog? He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. Opened an old photo. It showed a white dog curled up beside a camp chair. Colden sat nearby, feeding the dog from a tin plate. The timestamp, August 2021. Brenda stared at the screen. Tuck had been with him. Not just passing through. Not just waiting. Protecting. Witnessing. Uncle Illy said the dog kept coming back. Elijah said. Voice cracking. Wouldn't he leave his side? Tuck licked Elijah's hand, and for the first time, Brenda saw it. The circle was not just closing. It had always been there, drawn by loyalty, sealed by silence. Tuck had not been lost. He had been guarding the places people forgot. That night, Brenda could not sleep. Again, she sat by the fire with the brass whistle in one hand and Caleb's photo in the other. She remembered the last time she saw him. Helmet tilted back. Eyes laughing. You are too careful, he would said. You are too young, she would replied. But now she was not sure which of them had been right. Tuck lay at her feet, chest rising slow and steady. She reached down. He lifted his head. Still more, she asked softly. He blinked once. And she knew the answer. Part 5. The path he walked alone. Brenda stood in front of her hall closet, staring at the faded fire map one more time. Each red mark she would drawn the night before pulsed with silent, gravity possible places Tuck might have gone. Places someone like Caleb Ramirez might have ended up if he would veered off route during the Larkspur evacuation. She traced her finger along the ridge. Then deeper, beyond any marked safe zones. No roads. No comms. Only terrain. Behind her, Tuck paced. Tomorrow, she whispered. We go tomorrow? They set out at sunrise. January light cut sideways across the black pines, exposing their wounds. Trees that once sheltered life now leaned like question marks, all charred limbs and broken grace. Brenda adjusted her pack, one shoulder still sore from the rescue rotation last week. Old instincts did not die easy, neither did grief. Tuck led the way. They moved beyond the area she would visited with him before, past the fireline's edge, into terrain that looked like something out of a bad dream, twisted metal, glass melted into rock, and the occasional flash of a toy or boot buckle half submerged in ash. Then, at the top of a narrow ridge, Tuck stopped. Ears forward. Nose lifted. Silent, Brenda followed his gaze. Below, a steep gully, overgrown now with scrub and ghost grass. She scanned the valley floor. Heart. Hammering. Then she saw it. Rusted axe. Half buried. Next to it, a boot. Blackened leather, cracked by heat and time. Brenda descended slowly, boots crunching through brittle underbrush. Tuck did not move from the ridge. He simply watched. The silence in the gully was absolute. She crouched beside the boot, picked it up. Inside, a tag. Ramirez E7. Her throat closed. This was it. The end of the line. Caleb had made it here. Alone. Nearby, half hidden beneath a collapsed pine, she found a scorched turnout coat, torn, fused in places from intense heat, a canteen still hooked to the belt, and beside that so small she almost missed it, a strip of red nylon, a dog collar. Brenda sat on a fallen log, the collar in her lap. She remembered now the last call she heard from Caleb that day, trying to get a kid and dog out trapped behind the east switch. Visibility 0. If I do not. And then nothing. No follow-up. No ping. They assumed he would die trying to save someone. But maybe Tuck was that someone, and he would made it out. Alone. Brenda closed her hand around the melted buckle. Sorry, she whispered. We did not find you. We did not. But the words dissolved. Because what could she say to a ghost? She buried what she found in the gully, took only the collar and a single tag from Caleb's coat, used her pocket knife to carve a name into the trunk of a nearby tree. Caleb 2021. Still watching. When she looked up, Tuck had descended the ridge. He sat beside her, silent. Brenda did not call him. He had come of his own accord. She held out the collar. Tuck sniffed it, then laid his head on her knee. That night, back at the house, she lit a fire and placed the red collar beside Bear's urn. 3 dogs. 3 stories, and all of them survivors. The next morning, Brenda visited the fire station. Captain Morales was surprised to see her. Didn't expect you back, he said. Eyebrows raised. I'm not. Brenda replied, but I have got something for the memorial wall. She handed over Caleb's tag and the photo she would taken of the carved tree. You found him? Morales asked. Voice soft. I found where he made his last stand. He studied the tag. Swallowed hard. And the dog. Brenda smiled faintly. Still watching. Later that week, she stood on her porch while Tuck lay in a patch of sunlight. eyes closed. She held the brass whistle between her fingers. Didn't he blow it? Didn't he need to? Because Tuck had already come back. And because now, maybe, so had she. But just as she turned to go inside, her phone buzzed. A text from Ruth. I have been thinking. Tuck came back for a reason. Maybe there is more to it than we understand. Brenda typed back slowly. Maybe, or maybe love just refuses to die quietly. And as she hit send, she felt it. The faintest breeze through the pines. And a memory that no longer hurt the way it used to. Part 6. The dog, the widow, and the radio silence. Brenda had not heard a radio call in 18 months. Not a real one. Not the kind that sent adrenaline ripping through your chest, turning your muscles into something more than flesh. But that night, she dreamed she was back in the fire truck window open, bear-riding shotgun, the dispatch crackling through like gravel in a tin can. E7. Come in. E7. Do you copy? She woke up gasping. Outside, the wind bent through the trees, and Tuck stood motionless at the door, watching something Brenda could not see. She rose slowly, still half in the dream. Tuck. He did not move. Not until she opened the door. Then he stepped forward into the night. Nose lifted. Body tense. She followed barefoot, the whistle swinging lightly against her chest. By the edge of the yard stood an old cedar stump. She would meant to cut it down after the last storm, but somehow it always escaped her saw. Tuck sat beside it now, waiting. Brenda paused. There nailed to the wood was something she had not seen before. A piece of plastic wrapped paper, curled at the corners. She pulled it free. It found contact Ruth mostly. For Tuck, he knows the way back. It was Ruth's handwriting. Brenda stared. Had Ruth left this here? When? Or had it been there longer? Waiting? Like everything else. Tuck brushed against her leg, and Brenda realized this was not the end of the story. It was another beginning. 2 days later, Brenda stood on Ruth's porch again. Rain slicked the steps, and the wind smelled like wet leaves and earth. Tuck sat beside her, steady as a stone. Ruth opened the door. Sweater sleeves rolled. Eyes shadowed with something Brenda could not name. I was hoping you would come. Brenda held up the note. Ruth looked down at it, took a long breath. I left that in case someone found him, but not me. She said, back when I was living in a FEMA tent, wandering the burn zone like a ghost. I put those little notes all over, nailed them to trees, stumps, even a fence post in front of a church that does not exist anymore. You thought someone might find him, Brenda said softly. I hoped. Ruth whispered, but I did not know. He was just gone. Brenda nodded, then reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out the second collar, the red nylon one from the ridge. Melted but intact. Ruth took it in trembling hands. Roberts. She breathed. The first one we bought. He would not let me throw it out. Said it had stories in it. She looked up. I thought the fire took this. It did not. Brenda said. Tuck kept it with him. That evening, the three of them sat at Ruth's tiny kitchen table. Ruth, Brenda, and the dog who belonged to both of them, and yet to neither. Ruth brewed strong chamal with too much honey. Brenda drank it anyway. The kitchen was quiet, except for the steady sound of rain on the tin roof. He never stopped guarding. Brenda said, "No." Ruth whispered. There was a silence. Then Ruth asked, "You ever think grief has its own weather?" Brenda glanced at the window. "I think sometimes we live inside the storm, so long we forget what the sun feels like." Ruth nodded. Her fingers gently stroked the brass whistle lying between them on the table. "He brought us both back," Ruth said, piece by piece. Tuck lay at their feet, eyes half closed. Later that night, Brenda walked to her truck in the dark. Tuck did not follow. He stayed on Ruth's porch, resting under the glow of the porch light, watching. Brenda paused at the driver's side. She looked back and saw Ruth lean down, kiss Tuck's scarred head, and whisper something into his ear. Brenda did not hear it, but she felt it. Something settling, something being returned. At home, Brenda sat on her couch in silence. The collar lay on the coffee table, beside Bear's urn and the photograph of Caleb. She reached for the radio that had not worked in months, turned the dial. Static, and then faint, buried beneath layers of white noise. "Come in." Engine 7. Holding the line. Brenda stared. The radio crackled, then fell silent. She rose and walked to the door. Opened it. Tuck was there, soaked from the rain, looking at her with eyes that knew too much and still waited for the rest. Part 7. Ashes don't forget. The next morning, Brenda returned to the ridge. This time, she brought a spade, a field notebook, and Caleb's melted turnot coat, folded tight in the passenger seat. Tuck sat beside it, unmoving. She was not sure what she was searching for. Not exactly. The truth, maybe, or a trail no one else had followed. But something in her bones said it was not over. The valley below the ridge had not changed. Still quiet. Still scarred. She found the stump where she would carved Caleb's name. Ran her fingers across the letters. Still fresh. Still hers. Then she sat and listened. The wind rustled through blackened branches like whispers in an empty chapel. She closed her eyes, thought about Caleb, his last call, his voice. If I do not. What had he meant to say? Tuck nosed the edge of the stump, then turned. Ears perked. He walked into the woods behind it slowly, deliberately. Brenda followed. 100 feet in, the land dropped into a shallow bowl of trees. Not quite a clearing, more like a forgotten pocket of earth. And there beneath the base of a leaning fir Brenda saw something half hidden by soil. She knelt, brushed the earth away. Dog bones. Tiny. Curved. Fragile. Not Tuck's. A pup. Maybe more than one. She swallowed. Beside them, a burned duffel bag. Split open. Inside, charred notebooks, a rusted fire shelter, a flask, and something wrapped in wax cloth. She opened it gently. Letters, 5 of them, each one addressed to a different name. Each signed, Caleb. Back home, Brenda dried the letters on her kitchen table. They were smoke-stained but legible. One was to his mother, one to a woman named Heather, a fiancé, one to a childhood friend, to her, and the 5th, to Tuck. She opened her own letter last. Brenda, if you are reading this, I did not make it back. Sorry. I should be turned around, but there was a dog in the woods, and a girl. I could not leave them. You told me once that being brave is not about fire, it is about staying when it is easier to run. So I stayed. If they are alive, please tell them I tried. Her hand trembled. She opened the letter to Tuck next. You are a damn fine dog. Smarter than me. Probably. If you make it out, stay close to someone kind. Not everyone will deserve you, but someone will. Wait for them. She wept then. Not softly. Not pretty. She wept the way old grief demands, shoulders shaking. Breath hitching. Hands curled over the table like prayer. And when it passed, Tuck was still beside her, waiting. The next day, she drove back to Ruth's, showed her the letters, the tiny bones, the duffel. Ruth pressed a hand to her mouth. There was a girl. She whispered, Leela, lived 2 trailers over. Her family did not make it. Brenda nodded. Caleb did what he could. Ruth looked down at Tuck, and so did he. They buried the pup bones beneath Ruth's almond tree. No gravestone, just a flat river stone with the word watched carved into it. Tuck lay beside the spot until dusk. Didn't he move? Didn't he eat? Brenda let him stay. Some grief had to be kept. That night, the radio crackled again, clearer this time. Ridgeview 7, this is home base. We see you. Brenda did not answer. Just sat beside the fire with the brass whistle around her neck, and a dog at her feet who had walked alone through fire and silence, and waited for someone to carry the rest. Part 8. The night watch never ends. The dreams came harder now. Caleb, standing in the smoke, reaching toward her with an ungloved hand. The girl, Leela, cradling a pup that was not breathing. And Tuck, always just behind them, silent, waiting, as if he would been standing watch all this time, and she had simply refused to see him. Brenda woke with the taste of ash in her mouth, and the dog curled beside her boots. Not bare, not a memory. Tuck, alive, but tired. He would stopped eating again. Even Ruth noticed it. He lies under that tree every morning. She said, voice thin, like he is expecting something. Brenda looked across the lawn at the almond tree, where the tiny bones rested beneath the earth. Tuck lay perfectly still beneath it. Not asleep. Not alert. Just present. I think he is saying goodbye. Brenda said. To her? Ruth asked. Or to all of it? Brenda did not answer. She tried hiking with him again down to the switchback trail, where they would found Caleb's last camp. Tuck followed, slow but steady, but when they reached the ridge, he stopped walking, stood facing east. The fire had started from that direction 2 years ago, a spark from a failing power line, ripped through 30,000 acres in less than a week. Brenda stepped beside him. "It is over?" she said, but Tuck did not move. His ears twitched, his body tense, as if waiting for the wind to carry something: smoke, memory, voice. She reached for the whistle, lifted it to her lips, and paused. Then she blew. The soundless note echoed only in silence. Tuck sat down and let his body finally rest. Back at home, Brenda unpacked the box she had not opened in over a year. Photos of Bear, old station patches, a charred nameplate from her locker at Ridgeview Engine 7, and a letter unsigned, unsent, written after Caleb's memorial service. "If I could go back, I would stay. I would stay like you did." She left it on the table, added Caleb's field letter beside it. Some things belonged next to each other, even if the people never got to be. That night, the radio spoke again. No static this time. Just one line. "You held the line. We saw you." Brenda did not reply. Didn't he need to? Instead, she reached down to the floor where Tuck lay and ran her fingers along the curve of his spine, down to the old red collar she had tied gently around his neck, not as a leash, as a memory, a medal. Morning came slow. The almond blossoms had begun to push through the cold. Ruth called. "I had a dream," she said. "Robert was in it. He said to tell the dog he did good." Brenda smiled through the phone. "Then tell him." She held the phone out toward Tuck. The dog stirred, opened one eye. Brenda whispered, "You did good." He laid his head back down and slept. Later, Brenda stood beneath the tree where they would buried the pup and pressed the brass whistle to the bark. She tied it there with a strip of red nylon. Let the wind have the rest. There was still time for one last trail. One last walk. She looked at Tuck. He looked back. And together, they stepped beyond the yard, beyond what was lost, into whatever came next. Part 9 title, What the Dog Knew. The morning was gentle the way only late winter can be. Muted skies. Soft light. The cold not quite bitter enough to bite. Brenda filled her thermos, buckled her boots, and whistled softly, not with the brass one, but with her lips. Tuck rose slowly. The stiffness in his back legs was more noticeable now. His gait had shortened in the last week, and sometimes he paused before jumping into the truck, waiting for her to lift him. But he still came when she called, and that morning, as they drove toward the overlook above Ridgeview Valley, Tuck sat upright in the passenger seat, eyes scanning the hills like he would never stop guarding them. Brenda parked near the same turnout she and Caleb had once used to watch lightning storms roll in across the high ridge. The bench was still there, charred but intact, its metal bolts rusted with age. She poured the coffee, unscrewed the lid, and held it toward the sky. "A toast," she said quietly, "to what holds and what lets go." Tuck settled beside her, body curled tight. His breathing had grown shallow lately, not labored, just quieter, as if each breath was being measured, metered out in some internal rhythm Brenda could not hear. "I know you have been trying to tell me something," she said, stroking the scar along his shoulder. "It is okay." Tuck looked up, just once, then returned his gaze to the valley. A hawk passed overhead. Far below, the ghost outlines of the Ridgeview fire scars etched the land like an old map. Brenda traced them with her eyes. This was where the fuel line broke. This was the church that did not survive. This was the place where Bear had once dug up a stolen lunch from her backpack and refused to give it back. All of it still there. All of it changed. She closed her eyes and listened. Wind. A squirrel rustling. Nothing else. But she felt something. Deep inside. That this was not about Caleb anymore. Not only about grief. Or guilt. It was about letting him go. And letting Tuck rest. They returned home by mid-afternoon. Tuck did not eat dinner. Didn't he drink water? He curled beneath the window with the western light falling across his face. Brenda did not speak. She lay beside him on the floor, ran her hand over his ribs, his side, the fine hair beneath his chin. The brass whistle still hung from the almond tree. She would visit it later. That night, she woke with the certainty that something had changed. She reached down. Tuck was still breathing, but slowly, rhythm deeper now, like the tide pulling back. Brenda rested her palm on his side. "I?" she whispered. Tuck did not move, but his ears twitched. Just slightly. Then she felt it. A final exhale. Still. Quiet. True. She buried him beside Bear, beneath the wind chimes in the backyard. Ruth came. So did Elijah Calder. The nephew. He brought flowers, wild ones, and helped Brenda smooth the stone she placed over the grave. It read simply, Tuck. He waited. The house was very quiet that night. Brenda stood in the hallway and reached for the old fire radio, turned the dial. Static. Then, just before she clicked it off, home base to E7. You brought him all the way back. He is clear. You are clear. Brenda closed her eyes. Let the tears come. Not heavy this time, but soft, like rain easing out of the sky when the fire's finally gone. Part 10. What remains? The ground had settled by spring. Brenda knelt in the yard with a trowel, planting foxglove beside the grave. Bear's name was on one stone, Tuck's on the other. Between them, a line of blossoms would grow, a living thread binding two lives that had walked with her through fire. Silence, and the spaces in between. Wind stirred the wind chimes above. Not a song, just a memory you could almost hum. She would keep the whistle up on the almond tree, where Tuck used to sit with his eyes fixed on the horizon. Some morning she saw him there again out of the corner of her eye. Just for a blink, not a ghost. Something else. Something made of loyalty, or time, or the truth dogs know and people forget. Ruth called more often now. Sometimes they talked about nothing. Birds. Arthritis. The price of flour. Sometimes they talked about Robert. Bear. Tuck. One afternoon, Ruth said, "You think they wait for us?" Brenda did not answer right away. She looked at the yard, at the two stones side by side. "I think they walk ahead," she said, "but not so far we can follow." Brenda returned to the Ridgeview overlook in early May. She brought two things, a photo of Caleb and a second brass whistle she would found in an old gearbox. It had belonged to her captain. She cleaned it, polished it, tied it to the bench rail with twine. Below, the fire-scarred land was greening, grass rising from ash, saplings where smoke once hovered. She closed her eyes and whispered, "You can stand down now." And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. She started walking more in town, volunteered at the shelter, helped train the younger firefighters with search and rescue dogs. She never said much about Tuck, only that he was a survivor, the kind you do not try to replace, the kind you carry in your chest, not on a leash. One evening, while walking home, she saw a boy sitting by the school fence, crying into his sleeves. Beside him sat a scrappy black dog with oversized paws and a bent ear. Brenda crouched slowly. The dog looked up, eyes curious, a little nervous. "Lost?" she asked gently. The boy shook his head. "I found him, but I can to keep him. My mum says no." Brenda ran a hand over the dog-esque horse fur. "I think he is waiting for someone," she said. The boy sniffled. "Who?" Brenda smiled, slow and sad and full of something new. "Maybe you. Maybe me. Maybe someone who remembers what it is like to be left behind." The dog leaned into her palm. She did not take him home that night. But the next morning, she saw him again. Same spot, same boy. Still waiting. Some goodbyes are not endings. Some grief does not close, but it softens. It takes shape. It becomes a collar hanging from a tree, a whistle tied to a bench, a trail you still walk because love walked it first. And sometimes, when the wind is right, and the past is quiet, and the world stops spinning just long enough, you can almost hear it. The tags jingling in the dark, the soft padding of feet beside your own, the weight of loyalty that never quite left. The end. Thank you for reading The Ghost Collar. Grief never vanishes, but sometimes it comes home limping and leads us back to ourselves.